Hi, my name is Chris Surbeck, and I'm a professor of civil engineering. I'm going to share with you how I teach my course, Water Resources Engineering, which is CE 472, and it's for senior level civil and geological engineering students. So there are three things I want to tell you about. One is how I organize my Blackboard. Two is how I do my synchronous Zoom meetings. And three is how I do my face-to-face meetings. So let's start with Blackboard. The way I do Blackboard is I organize it in terms of modules. So if you look at my screen here and go to content, you're going to see that I organize the semester into 4 modules where we have the majority of the content for the course. And each module is 3 weeks long. So once the student went through module 1 and understood the pattern of the first module, then it was easy to understand the pattern for modules 2, 3, and 4. So if we look, for example, at module 2, you're going to see that the first thing that I post is the schedule for the next 3 weeks. And so we have a combination of Zoom meetings that are synchronous, so live and together. And we also have face-to-face meetings the following week, which I call M to M meetings, mask to mask meetings. And then that module is concluded with an exam. The homework deadlines are clearly shown here, and which students need to go where is also shown here. So for example, last names A through H will meet in Zoom synchronously on this day here. And then for example, last names RAT through Z will meet mask to mask in a classroom at this time here. So this is how I'm able to have some interaction with all of the students. So this is how I organize Blackboard, and you can see in the table of contents here on the left how the students can access all the content, and I tell them to go exactly in that order, and it follows the schedule that I post here. All right, the next thing I want to share with you is how I do my Zoom meetings. And so if you look at my shared PowerPoint here, for our Zoom meetings, I have a schedule for that class. And I also start out with some announcements, and that includes my designated participants. These are students who I email a day or two ahead of time and ask them if they're willing to be designated participants. What that means is that they are going to be ready for me to ask them questions. They're going to help me monitor the chat, and they're also going to help some interaction in the class by preparing some questions of their own. And I wait for the students to reply to me saying they're willing to do it, and then I put their names here in this PowerPoint slide. So we start out with some announcements like this, but then we move on to the topic of the day. And so a quick sampling here is that I can be covering flow rate that we can get from a pump and a system. And so we go over the equations together, and I always pause for questions. And then I always do annotations on the slides for when the students need to pay attention to certain things. So for example, if they need to pay attention to some of these graphs and need to pay particular attention to an axis title and remember how to read a graph by picking a point and going up to a curve and then picking a point going up to the other curve. So it's very, very interactive. So this is how I do my live Zoom meetings with the students. And this is very much how my asynchronous videos also go. Finally, the mask-to-mask meetings are in small groups because the students have to fit in the classroom capacity for COVID when they have to be spaced 6 feet apart. But the classroom then is the time when we really work more hands-on with handwriting and figuring out the problems and doing equations in detail. So this is how I teach CE 472.